Today I'm Leslie with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center. I'm here with Annalena, my partner, I guess. She does a lot of the work that needs to be done to get these webinars up and going. So Annalena's here if anybody needs anything. And
Hello.
there she is. And we want to introduce Eric Spellman. Eric has established himself as a leader in helping customers meet their online goals through practical hands-on applications. So we're really excited to have him leading his series of different webinars. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over to Eric. Raise your hand. We'll allow you to talk. I always ask probably some crazy questions, but it gets me so engaged with this that I just can't help it, and I want to hear what's going on. So thank you. Enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely don't be shy to ask questions. That's what we want. And Eric loves questions. So without further ado, Eric, we will let you chat.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to this, and I'm excited about this. I mean, granted, I'm not on the stage, you're not out in the audience. We're all kind of looking at this on our computers, but I promise if you stick with me, if you follow what I'm saying, your business will be ready for the next emergency. And with a lot of current events going on right now, disaster recovery is very relevant right now. So let's talk a little bit about it. A lot of times when I ask people about disaster recovery, they don't know what I'm talking about, or they have too narrow a definition of what a disaster actually is. So let's talk about how we're going to cover this in this hour. We're going to talk about what a disaster is. We're going to talk about prioritizing your assets. In other words, what's important. Developing recovery scenarios. So let's dive right in. Now, as with all of my presentations, if you have a question, feel free to put it in chat. And my wonderful moderators will be happy to ask me. And as I always love to say to my moderators, ask me at any time. When I say something and someone had a thought and they have a question, I want to make sure that we're still in the same subject area so it's relevant at that time. And trust me, ask a good question because trust me, even if you think your question is silly or ground zero, there's other people who have it. Okay, so please ask. Let's talk about what a disaster actually is, because a lot of businesses, they plan, but then they don't include certain things. They don't include certain events that, well, are technically a disaster. The easy way to do this is what stops you from working. Basically, just about anything that stops you from working could be called a business disaster. Okay? It doesn't have to be an act of God. It doesn't have to be a meteor hitting your building. It just has to be basically anything that stops you. The weather is a big piece. And usually when I talk about disasters, that's what people think of first is the weather. I mean, and like I said, you may, if you're watching this, the recorded version of this video, what you don't know is that we're in the middle of a huge power outage in Texas, water outage, and there's all sorts of weather-related disasters that are causing businesses to really hurt right now. So weather can definitely be there. And when we talk about weather, I mean, I include everything. I include flooding, I include fires, crazy snowstorms, ice, all sorts of stuff. And, depending on what coast you're on, it could be hurricanes, it could be wildfires. Weather includes a lot of different things. Hacker intrusions are another big piece that can be considered a disaster. And we all know of companies that we've heard of in the news that got hacked. And a lot of these companies don't make it because one of the key things to remember about e-commerce, and that's why I use that word when describing this series or this presentation, e-commerce is all about trust. In order for people to trust you and do business with you over the internet and spend money with you and trust you with their information, there has to be trust. And when a hacker breaks in, you lose that. And so rebuilding trust is key. Death of a key employee. And like I said, I'll be talking more about each one of these, but I just want to kind of give you a heads up of where we're going. Death of a key employee is often a very surprising, very traumatizing, and a very scary thing for a business. A lot of times, if plans have not been made for succession, is what we call it, then many times the business will flounder, and in some cases it will even fail, simply because the one person who everyone saw as the head of the business is gone, or the one key person who either sold or made the product is gone. So let's get into disaster. A web server crash is also considered a disaster. Now, you may never see it happen. In fact, you can be sitting there, everything can be fine at your house, everything fine at your business, and then all of a sudden your website doesn't come up anymore. People are unable to get to it. People are unable to buy from you. You're no longer getting leads. It just ceases to exist. Now, what's the downside of that? It's huge. Because if you are a very popular website, a very popular business, then people are trying to get to you all the time. And if people suddenly discover that, oh, their website doesn't come up, after a little bit, they're going to start wondering, did they go out of business? And if they realize you didn't run out of or go out of business, they're going to say, oh gosh, I wonder what happened. I don't know if I want to give them my information or not. You know, if they can't even maintain the stability of their website, how can they maintain my account? So a web server crash is huge and is definitely considered a disaster. Internet outage is also huge. And in fact, some people might say this is worse. I'm basically talking at your business, where you're humming along, you're answering emails, you're doing video chats, you're doing everything, and bam, there goes the internet. It can be the craziest, most random thing, or it could be for a lot of other reasons, like you picked a terrible internet service provider, or you live far away from where their internet connection is. And some drunk guy on a backhoe just cut through a fiber optic cable. You never know. And my point is, internet outages can cause severe, severe problems, and we'll talk about those. Product failure. Something goes wrong with your product, something terrible, and you're going to have to do a recall. There's all sorts of things that can be a disaster. And if you suddenly discover that your product is now dangerous, or if your product does not meet the goals that you set for it. In other words, if you say it will do X, Y, and Z, but it only does X and Y, well, you got to watch out. We all know how litigious this society is, and people filing lawsuits. So that can be a disaster just as well. Delivery issues, and we're seeing that right now. What if you're trying to get your products, your e-commerce products out to people and they're just not getting there? Or it's taking so long to get there that people just say, oh, I don't care. I'm just going to go to Walmart and get it instead. What we don't want is to put up burdens or barriers to people doing business with you. Okay? So any of these kind of things can be complete and total disasters. So what do we do? Well, I think one of the keys is to prioritize your assets. Now, what's an asset? Because I told you we'd all be doing this, at a ground zero level. What is an asset? An asset is basically something you own that has value. It is something that you have. Most people think of assets as like a physical thing, like a building, like inventory, like equipment, or even people. But I'm here to tell you, your data is a big piece of that. So what must you protect? When talking about disaster recovery and coming back, you need to understand what was your asset in the first place that you may have just lost. Data is number one. I'm here to tell you, number one. Everything else, including people, can be replaced, but not your data. Unless you're going to sit there and retype it all back in and hope you remember it. Hope that there's paper somewhere that you can copy it from. I will tell you this, most businesses that are unable to recover data loss for whatever reason, do not survive. And yeah, that means backups, and we'll talk about that. But data is number one. It is your number one asset. When we talk about prioritizing, realize that your data is the most important, most valuable thing you own. And it's probably going to be the hardest thing to recreate if you ever lose it. Customer information, that's huge, because when you lose customer information, whenever you become the custodian of customer information, specifically private information, then you have a responsibility. It is your job to make sure that no one steals it, no one takes it, and it doesn't just get lost. This kind of goes back to that trust issue. We've all heard the horror stories of, companies that maybe got hacked into and information was taken, like a Visa, MasterCard, a bank, something like that, or even some of the massive stores that are out there may have gotten hacked, and a lot of customer information, maybe even their credit card information, was taken. Well, you've got to realize that even though data is your number one asset, the number one piece of your data that you need to protect at all costs, your customer data. Okay? Because a customer who loses their data, and if it's shown that you lost it, they can come after you. Server and internet uptime. This has got to be a priority when we're talking about what's most important. If you're going to call yourself e-commerce, if you're going to say that you do business on the internet, then you've got to realize that your main single point of failure is what? The internet. I mean, if you don't have internet, you don't have a business anymore. And so making sure that you direct resources to keep that up and going is key. Having a good internet service provider, having one that, has some redundancies built into it so that a single cable failure is not going to cost you your business. Okay. And also having backups, and we'll talk about that.
Eric, I was going to ask you on the customer information that you don't want to get out there. Are you talking about that you can still like keep it on your computer and like other people in the company can have access to your customer information? Are you talking, how are you talking about that?
Okay, that's a great question. When someone does an e-commerce transaction, in other words, maybe you actually can take credit cards on your website. When that happens, the credit card information is not stored on the web server, okay? If the web server is done correctly, and if the e-commerce software is done correctly, then at no point is it ever saved to a hard drive. No one can hack in there and get their credit cards that way, okay? The transaction is very secure. Like I said, if you choose a good provider. And by the way, this is not in my slides, but I'll just throw it out there. If you are a small business and you are looking to take credit cards and sell things over the internet, people, can give their credit cards, you get paid, and then all you have to do is ship it. The biggest vendor out there that I like is Shopify. Okay, Shopify.com, Shopify.com, like shop and then IFY. They're the best one out there for that. But when we talk about customer data, your customer data will exist in two places. It will exist on the web server temporarily, like the customer's name and address and all that. But it will also exist in your servers back in your office, and you probably have a lot more information back there. So when we talk about people hacking into your e-commerce business, it's not just about that server out there on the internet where your web stuff is. It's also about the computer on your desk, the computer at your house, the server in your office. And that's the kind of information we're talking about. Anything that would be considered personal information. And it gets even worse if you're in the medical field, because then you run into HIPAA, okay? And that's the medical way of trying to protect people's medical information and their medical history online. So there's a lot of different bits of information. When I say customer information, I basically mean everything. No one should be able to get on your system and see who's buying what from you. And I wouldn't let them. You've got to protect that. Did that kind of answer your question?
I think so. I was really kind of thinking about the online shopping aspect. So yes, that did answer it.
Okay, yeah.
And
Online shopping is a pretty protected kind of thing. I mean, ever since the banks kind of figured out security, I mean, we all check our bank accounts online now. And so that same security is when you make a transaction. I mean, it's all encrypted, it's all scrambled, so that even if someone intercepted what was going on between you and a shopping site, it would look like gibberish. And so those transactions are fairly secure. And I say fairly because there's no such thing as absolute, but about as secure as they can be, as long as you have good software.
Eric, I just wanted to take a moment to let everyone know about one of your upcoming webinars, Risk Management in a Digital World. If you haven't heard of that one yet or attended it yet, I'll send out the link to that because it goes into greater detail as far as protecting some of those assets. And it's a great webinar. So just
Thank you
wanted
for,
to mention that real
yeah,
quick.
thank you for bringing that up. Risk management is, what you should do before disaster happens. And so we'll talk about how to measure your risk and the steps you can take even today. And many of them cost nothing for you to protect your data and sleep better. Today, we're talking about disaster recovery. The problem has already happened. What do you do about it? If someone has stolen your information, if your information is just gone, what are you going to do? Server failure. When your server goes down, when your web server goes down, a lot of people don't know what to do. And in fact, a lot of people don't even realize the server is down for a while unless someone just tells them, because no one sits there and goes out there and just constantly checks their website to see if it's up or not. And so a lot of times, the first time you will realize that there's a problem is by a phone call from someone saying that they can't get to your website. So a lot of times I tell people, you might want to be a little more proactive about that. Depending on how important your server is and your website is, you may want to have a system set up where it's just constantly checking it. We call it pinging it. And there are definitely some tools out there that will let you check that. And you can just Google uptime checker, UPTIME, one word, uptime software. And basically what it'll do is it'll just send a little signal maybe every 5 minutes or whatever you decide to your website, just to make sure it's awake and that it's responding back. And then if it doesn't get that, then a warning goes to your phone or wherever you want it to go. But let's say that your server does go down. You better call that host immediately. Call them immediately. Even if you don't know why it's down, you call them immediately. Because chances are they have other people that they are hosting as well. And if one of their servers went down with a whole bunch of businesses on it, I guarantee that phone queue is going to fill up. So I say never, ever, ever, ever hesitate on calling your web host. And you have that number right there. Don't be where you have to look it up every time. You have it right there. And you call them now and you say, what the heck is going on? First thing you're going to want to have them do is, if it did go down, maybe they could just turn it right back on. Maybe it was a funky reboot. Maybe it was a glitch and they rebooted. Who knows? See if it'll come back on. But if their server has actually cratered, okay, I mean the hard disk crashed, something went wrong, and smoke coming out of the back, it's done. If that's actually happened, then the first thing you need to insist on is that they restore the last backup that they did of your web server. Now, this opens up a whole new mess, because your assumption is that your web host is backing up your website. Some web hosts don't do it as frequently as others. And so one of the things you might want to do is call your web host and say, how often is my website being backed up? And if I had to have you restore it, how recent is it? You need to ask those questions, because I'm here to tell you, they don't back them up every day like you think. Some web hosts are really good and they'll back it up every 6 hours or something like that. But some of them don't back up at all. And that might be why they're so cheap. So get those backups restored. Get those backups restored as quickly as possible. Find out what the time lost was. So if they tell you that this is a backup from yesterday, then what you're going to need to do is kind of reconstruct what happened from yesterday till now. And the way you can do that is by looking through your email, okay? Because if you worry that there were transactions lost or something was lost in that time period, many times when someone buys something from your website, an email gets generated and sent to you notifying you that someone did. Well, guess what? That email, which you were kind of just filtering off into your archive, is now very important because it is documenting that someone actually made a transaction with you. And so you'll definitely want to be able to go back and find those. Be honest with your customers. When a customer calls up and says, hey, your website's down, and everyone at your company is like going crazy trying to get it all back up, don't lie to them. Don't say, no, you might want to check your internet. You might want to reboot. No, we're fine here. No, if your website is down, you admit it, because the worst thing that can possibly happen is for you to totally destroy the trust that you had with these people when they were buying with you by lying. Okay. Be honest and say, hey, one of our systems just went down. We're getting it up as quickly as possible. Check back in a few minutes and everything should be fine. Admit it. Tell them it's not them. When you're truthful with them, they appreciate that. They understand that nothing is 100%. Okay? And trust me, I've had this happen numerous times. Numerous times. And when a web server goes down, depending on how often people are using it and how they're using it, your phone lines will light up like a Christmas tree. And you need to make sure that whoever is answering those phones has the right script and that the story people are getting from your company is consistent. You don't want the head receptionist or the head phone answering operator saying, oh, I'm sorry, our servers crashed. And then a tech guy going, oh, we did a maintenance update. It'll be right back up. No, inconsistency. By the way, let me just give you some advice. As a business owner, you need to tell all of your employees, if they ever get on the phone after this happens, never use the word crash. Never, ever, 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 ever say server crash. Don't ever say your computer's crashed. Don't ever say your website crashed. Don't use the word crash, because to a non-technical person, a crash is a very permanent thing. A crash is a very long-lasting damage thing. Whereas in the computer world, it could simply mean reboot. So we don't like to use the word crash. If you want, call it a temporary glitch, a temporary disconnection, something. Whatever you do not allow your people to call it a crash. All you're going to do is panic people. Conduct a server autopsy. And this may not be your job. This may be the job of your web host. What happened and why did it happen? Now, sometimes servers will crash simply because they're old, simply because they've gone past their lifetime. I tell people all the time, a good web server is probably good for a couple of years before it needs to be replaced. It's not that those servers can't run past 2 years. It's just that many times they're not built with today's security and things in mind. And so make sure you're with a web host who is updating their servers regularly. What you don't want is for your website to be on some cheap web host in your city, Uncle Bob's server garage or something weird like that, where he just took an old PC from 1989 and turned it into a web server. No. You want to make sure that your internet service provider has the resources necessary to keep you up to date. Keep in mind, that server is just as important as the brick and mortar of your store. You may not see it. I mean, I live in Amarillo, Texas. Amarillo is not the biggest town, obviously. And so it's not a big internet hub. I really wouldn't want a web hosting company based in Amarillo, Texas, simply because we don't have enough major connections to the internet that if one of them drops, the others will pick up. So most internet service providers and places where you get your web hosting are actually connected at major hubs on the internet, like in Austin, Texas, or Albuquerque, or major cities where a whole bunch of large internet connections come in. It provides redundancy. I would rather my website be hosted on a server in a dedicated data center with multiple connections to the internet than sitting right next to me and using my little cable internet connection. You don't want that. Conduct a server autopsy, find out why it went down if you can. And then, like I said, you may want to choose a new host. Sometimes the reason you're not paying very much in web hosting is because you're not getting much web hosting. Hear me. You need to make sure that you equate the value of your business and being online with your choice in vendors for hosting. And before you ask, do I have any specific vendors I really like? I just tell people, try to make them national. Try to be national players when it comes to that, because they're less likely to go down. That's all. The bigger, the better, I always say. Places that host a whole bunch of businesses are going to have more motivation to stay up than someone who only has your business hosted. Any questions so far?
I do not see any questions. And
Okay,
yeah,
let's keep going.
okay.
What about the hacker? This is what a lot of people fear. They fear a hacker. They fear that a hacker is going to somehow get in and basically destroy their reputation or destroy their business or steal their customer data. You got to watch out for that. Now, you got to understand something about hackers, okay? A lot of people have the mistaken belief, pretty much based on how Hollywood shows it, that a lot of hackers are just, little teenage kids in their mom's basement with nothing else better to do. Not anymore. That may have been the case back in the day, back in the 90s. Can we just say that? But today, hackers are contractors and they are hired by countries. They are hired by political people to do things. And so you've got to realize that it's a lot more professional than it used to be. It's a lot more extensive than it used to be, and a lot more complicated and complex. A lot of times people said, "Oh, I won't fall for that. No hacker's going to get hold of me." Well, unless you have a PhD level, MIT cybersecurity guy constantly checking your website, then you've got to realize you are susceptible to a degree. And I'll be the first to tell you, for every lock, there's a pick. The key is to keep your locks ahead of the lock picks. And that's what a good web host can do. If you think you've been hacked, and usually the way you know you've been hacked is that someone has changed your website to either say something inappropriate or say something different or change prices on something. You'll usually know that it's a hack. And if that's the case, you need to contact your host immediately. And you need to immediately change all your passwords and have all your people change all of their passwords. And I mean everything. You see, one of the ways that hackers work is by spearfishing, okay? Spearfishing is where a hacker will do a little bit of research, and they will figure out who the head of the company is, or even smarter, who the head tech guy is at that company. They will then find that person's email address, and they will try to convince that person that they are someone else. They will directly email. That's why we call it spearfishing, because they're going after one person. They're not just sending out like a shotgun, blast at the whole company, hoping that some ignorant employee will answer. No, spearfishing is where they specifically target someone, usually someone they know has security access. And they will come across as something totally legit. Maybe they've done a little bit of research and they know things about that person, maybe their history. And so this hacker can throw out names and companies and words and industry jargon that convinces the owner of your company or your tech guy that they are not who they are. And what they're really trying to do is either A, get them to click on something in an email, which basically puts a hole, and then they can monitor a hole in your network, and then they can monitor that person. Or they're trying to convince that person to give out a password over the phone even. It's kind of low tech, but it still works. Social engineering is what we call that. So change all your passwords immediately, because you don't know if a spearfishing attempt has already occurred and one of your people has already been compromised and doesn't even know it. Change all your passwords, and I mean all, and have all your people change all their passwords, because the only way to stop it is to stop it. And if they have your passwords, there's not much you can do to stop it, because the internet doesn't know it's not you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so we work at home sometimes, and sometimes I work on a different computer. And my husband is he wants to tape over the camera on the computer, because he's saying that he thinks that people can see him typing in passwords.
Okay, I will both admire your husband and reject what he said at the same time.
Okay.
Let me explain. I am one of those people that puts a piece of a sticky note over my laptop lens when I'm not using it. And it's not out of paranoia. It's just that there's software out there we don't even realize. And all it takes is turning on that camera. That's all it takes. And you wouldn't know it. And so a very low tech and easy to do thing is just to simply put a sticky note, or even a piece of a sticky note, the sticky part, over the lens when you're not using it. And it's just one less thing to worry about. However, the lens doesn't show the keyboard. Just like this lens doesn't show my keyboard, you can't see what I'm typing. Okay, so I'm not worried about people watching your husband type and seeing what password they type in. But what I am worried about more is your husband or someone getting an email claiming to be something else, like, hey, this is blah, blah, blah National Bank, the one you go to. And we've had a break-in, and we need you to click here to verify your account, or else all your money's gone. And you scare someone enough, they'll click right there. And when they click, what they just did was run a program that allowed the hacker, basically, you gave them a skeleton key to that computer anytime they want to use it. So that's what I'm more worried about. Yeah, I cover up the lens, but that's just me. So I applaud him for that. But I'm not worried about anyone seeing what I type. I mean, granted, people can put in what we call keyloggers. I mean, they make tiny little, I don't have one here on me. Well, thumb drives look like they're small, right? Well, they make some even smaller than this that are about half of this. And it's a whole thumb drive in and of itself. And you plug it into the back of your computer, like I sneak into your office, pretend to be the UPS guy. And I sneak in, and all I do is stick it into the back of your computer that you don't even see. And you can't even see it's there because it's so small. And what it's doing is that little device I just stuck on your computer, plugged it into an empty USB drive or a USB slot, it's basically logging every keystroke you make on the keyboard and sending it to me. And yeah, I'm going to go through a bunch of garbage, but somewhere in there is going to be your password. And so maybe that's what he was talking about. But usually someone has to have physical access to your computer to get those little keyloggers in there. And they even make some that you can plug the keyboard into one end and the other end back into the computer. So it looks like your keyboard's plugged into the computer. I mean, there's so many different ways to do this. So did I over answer that for you?
No, I think that was good. And I'm going to tell him as soon as I get home.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah,
good.
that was a great answer.
At least he's thinking of security. So, I'm definitely not going to make fun of that. So educate your employees. So much of this is education. So much of this is education. Update all your systems. You need to make sure that all of your computers are updated on a regular basis. If you have a full-time tech guy hired, then one of their jobs is to make sure and go around to every computer that your business owns and make sure that it has the latest security things installed. I mean, it can be as simple as going to a computer and going into Windows and, typing in the, click the Windows button, type update, and you'll easily find Windows updates. Go make sure that all of those have been done. Okay. I mean, I just got a new update today. And as soon as this is over, I'll probably be rebooting my system to install the update. Don't turn those updates off. Make sure you update, because the majority of those updates, do you know what they're actually updating? Someone discovered a security hole and the update fixes that. And so trust me, people at Microsoft, people at Apple, they are racing to plug these holes as soon as they're discovered. But, when a hacker gets in, if there's things called 0-day exploits, which basically means they could do some serious damage before anyone realizes they've been hacked. So keep your system updated at all times. I've still run into systems that were obviously built, and haven't been updated in over 2 or 3 years. And those are just asking for it. We call those honeypots. Those are just saying, hackers, come get me. I'm right here. Because those kind of systems can be found very easily by scanning systems, by scanning the internet. And so if you don't keep your system updated, you're just asking for a problem. A key death in your company. This is a big piece of disaster recovery. And when I talk about disasters, remember I told you someone dying in your company can be considered a disaster. Okay. A lot of companies out there, maybe they make a very proprietary product. And the owner of the company is who? The inventor. And if that inventor has been so secretive, about his 11 herbs and spices, then there may be employees who don't know everything they need to know to keep that business going should he disappear, should he pass away. So you've got to always be thinking about that. Number one, you've got to make sure, I know I'm going to get in trouble for this one, because you always hear people say, don't write down your passwords, don't write down your passwords. Some of you have a boss who may be forgetful and may forget his password. And he was the only one who had full access because he was a little paranoid about giving employees full access to everything. So what happens if he forgets that password? He becomes a single point of failure in your company, a single point. All it takes is for him to get hit by a bus, and all of a sudden you can't access what you need to access. And so here's what I recommend to those bosses who say, no, I can't give anyone else access to this or that. You go up to them and you say this: hey, I'm not trying to get into stuff I'm not supposed to be into, and I'm not trying to give access to that to anybody. But what I am trying to do is create a disaster recovery strategy. So what I want you to do, Mr. Boss, is I want you to write down your usernames and passwords to all the major accounts that you have for the company including our bank accounts, whatever that only you know and no one else does. I want you to write that down all on a piece of paper. And then I want you to put that piece of paper in a sealed envelope, and then put that envelope in the company vault or a safe deposit box at the bank or somewhere. It just needs to exist. Kind of, in case of fire, break glass, that kind of situation. I can't tell you the heartache I've heard from companies who the owner passes away, usually all of a sudden. The family comes in to try to take over the business and run things, but they don't have access to anything. They don't have access to anything. And it really hurts them. So, because I mean, the only other way to do it, I'll be honest, if the owner was the one who handled, a good example, .coms. When you register your .com, and you're paying X amount per year just to use your .com address for web and email and all that. Well, what happens if the person listed as the contact at your company on there is gone? Then if you ever need to change it or it ever accidentally turns off and you try to get it back on, there's no one there at that company who's going to believe you or even know who you are. So having the password access to get into that and be able to make those changes is key. So document. There should never be a single point of failure. Duplicate your access. If there is another person who can be trusted, make sure that you have more than one account that can log in at that level. For my email, I use Gmail, the business version of that. And each Gmail account that has multiple accounts under it can have an administrative role. In other words, I can go and add people and take people out, of my email because I'm the administrator. Well, you can have more than one administrator. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is that, so check with your vendors, all the vendors for the software that's important to you. You need to call them up and go, hey, can there be 2 administrators? Can we have more than one just in case? And find out. Most good systems will allow that. And then you need to call your insurance agent and get Keyman insurance. Oh, this is huge. One of the biggest parts of disaster recovery is trying to replace a key man or a key woman and someone who is at that level. Keyman insurance, which is actually the industry term for it, Keyman insurance gives you the resources to help you get through that window or to help you hire someone or pay them or whatever. And it's basically money that kicks in if someone passes away. It's almost like a life insurance policy, but the money goes to the company. Okay. And a lot of times, companies who depend totally on someone, like they are the face of the company, they will often take out key man insurance, knowing that their business will be hurt when that key man is no longer there. Oh, one other thing on key man. Key man can also help you set what we call succession, the succession wishes of the owner, who succeeds that owner. In other words, who takes the reins. And that can be actually think of it almost as like a will. And so the succession agreement can be set up so that if the owner dies, then the company is handed over to so-and-so. And of course, there could be money as part of that. Like I said, the keyman insurance fees. Document transition. You've got to document it. And that's kind of where those succession plans come into play. If the owner of your company is old or clumsy, let's just say that, then you need to start thinking of what are their wishes when they're no longer around, or maybe they retire. I mean, it doesn't have to be awful. What are the succession plans? And they may not want to share that with everybody in the company, but at least it needs to exist. And like I said, it needs to be documented. and done through a lawyer or at least with some witnesses so that no one is going to question it. Because a lot of times, let me just tell you, a lot of families, when one of their family members passes away and that family member owned a company, a lot of these family members want to come in and just start taking over and just start running things. And that may not have been the wishes of the person who passed away. Loss of office. What happens when you lose your office? I mean, it is gone. You have to ask yourself, what can and can't you access? Now, because of the pandemic and COVID-19 and all of that, basically every business started thinking of that. You know, what is it that I can't do unless I'm at my office? You know, is there a piece of equipment there that is like a factory and sorry, I can't make a product at my house? Or is there access to customers that you suddenly no longer have? You know, for the customer, you don't want customers coming to your house to buy it. So what can you access? What can't you access? What is going to be your weakness in all of this? Oh, I hope it's not computers. Just to be honest, I hope it ain't computers. I hope you're not going to tell me I can't access our financials unless I'm at the office. You should be able to access that from home, from a library, from a hotel, from your phone, from anywhere. That is no longer the issue anymore. I can run my whole company from my phone. And what this goes a lot back to is cloud. And we talk a little bit about that in the risk management side. But cloud, moving your company to cloud. And so when you do that, when you move all your corporate software to the cloud, then guess what? You are no longer tied to your office. You're no longer tied to a single machine at your office. I mean, if my office burned to the ground, yes, I'd be upset, but my company wouldn't stop working and I wouldn't lose anything, okay, that insurance couldn't fix. And that's because all my data is in the cloud. In fact, my customers probably wouldn't even notice anything happen. And that's just what I want. So yeah, make a list of what you can and can't access if you're not at the office. And some of you already have because of the pandemic. Meeting with customers, how are you going to do that now? Now, a lot of us, because of COVID and everything, we're now trying to meet with customers using teleconferencing, which is working out great. And thank goodness that this technology was here when the pandemic hit, or else there'd be a lot more businesses out of business. So how are you going to meet with your customers? Do you have a strategy? Do you have a plan? And how quickly would it take for you to put that plan into action? What's going to happen if you can't get to your office for a week? What's going to happen if your office is suddenly not there, burned to the ground, sucked up into a tornado, Dorothy? What are you going to do? Okay. You've got to figure out how you're going to interact with your customers in a way that they can figure out. If it's too technical, they won't do it. Okay. So you've got to be thinking about that now before you have to. And what if you lost inventory? What if all your inventory was at the office and you lost it? Then you need to already talk about insurance at this point. And also, how quickly are you going to be able to recreate that inventory? What is going to be your downtime? What's it going to take for you to not only replace existing orders that you lost, but start handling new orders? You're going to have something in place that helps you get back up to speed as quickly as possible. And sometimes losing inventory is one of the biggest problems of all. I will tell you this, if what you sell is not a service, but it is a product, if you have a lot of products, you might seriously consider having a warehouse handle it, renting space in a warehouse that is environmentally controlled and protected to put at least a lot of your product in. That way, you're kind of splitting your eggs between two baskets, if you know what I mean. And maybe keep some of it at home. Just keep some in a backup. Just don't put it all in one place. And also make sure whatever room you are putting that inventory in, that you are protecting that room. Okay. I mean, if there is one room in your office that has like firewalls and, literal firewalls, not software, real thick cinder block walls and sprinklers and all that, that's where your inventory needs to go. Damaged hard drives, I'll be honest, there's really not much you can do. If you walk in your office like so many people in South Texas are about to do, and your computer, which was sitting on the floor, big mistake, your computer, which was sitting on the floor, is now in 5-6 inches of water from frozen pipes that are busted, it might be gone forever. Might be gone. Keep in mind, it's another reason not to keep your corporate data on individual machines, but to keep it in the cloud. In my book, a computer is just a tool to access my information. That's all it is. It's like a hammer. It isn't the end all be all of where the data is. It's simply an access tool. So if I break a hammer, no big deal. I'll go buy a new one because all the key stuff wasn't in the hammer to begin with. Hard drives really can't be fixed. Well, I take that back. If you're one of those people who accidentally had your only single copy of something on a hard drive and it's now making a clicking noise or not accessing it like it should, believe it or not, there are companies on the East and West Coast, there might even be one in Dallas by now, and that you can send the hard drive to. And they will take it into a lab, an environmentally controlled lab, and they'll take apart your hard drive. They'll be wearing those bunny suits. No, not real bunnies with ears, but like, surgical suits where there's like Darth Vader stuff. And they're going to open up your hard drive and take out the platters, and they're going to go see what they can get off of them for you. They charge a lot. They charge a lot. They charge a lot. I'm not a fan of damaged hard drives because usually the answer is, I'm sorry, I can't get anything off of it. We talk a little bit more about how to deal with that. And when we talk about backups in the risk management one, the risk management presentation. Believe it or not, there's another kind of disaster your business needs to be aware of, even in the e-commerce world, and that's a product recall. Something goes wrong with your product, it goes crazy and starts killing villagers or whatever, but something goes wrong. Be honest, be honest, be honest. Do not try to cover it up, because if you cover it up, you're done. The lawsuits will bury you and will take your company out. Be honest. Tell people there is a problem and that you're working on it. Get the insurance. They actually make insurance for this. If your product goes south and hurts somebody or could hurt somebody, there's insurance you can get that'll help you make it through that time. Talk to your insurance agent. Conduct a thorough study on where the problem happened. Was it a problem in manufacturing? Was it a lack of oversight? Was it, what was it? Poor materials, are you sourcing it from your materials from the wrong place? You've got to figure out what caused it. And then you've got to document and tell people why it will never happen again. Because in the end, you have to rebuild trust. You have to rebuild trust, because on the internet, that's all you got. The only reason people are going to do business with you is if they trust you. Your internet out, always have redundancy. Always have a backup. If your office has internet, what are you going to do when the internet goes out? Like I said earlier, some drunk guy on a backhoe may cut through a fiber optic line. No one's fault except his, but the problem is now your company's out of the internet. And pretty much all of your people, you might as well send them home. They can't do anything. They can't check their email. They can't do anything. So always have redundancy. I often say, because I work in the cloud, I'll just take all my employees to Starbucks and we'll pop open our laptops and we'll get to it. All we need is internet. That's all we need. So come up with your plan B, and maybe Starbucks is your plan B, and that's okay. But you must have a plan B for internet. Maybe sending your people home to work is a plan. But I prefer, if possible, to keep my people together, because not everyone can work by themselves unmonitored very well. You can always, in a pinch, you can use your phone as Wi-Fi. Most cell phones do have the ability to, turn it into a hotspot, where other people can connect to it. It'll be slow as all get out, but it will work. Or you can get a portable hotspot, like I'm showing you a picture of here. It's a tiny little device about the size of a credit card and about as thick as your wallet. And basically it connects the towers and creates a little Wi-Fi spot. You can connect 2 or 3 people to it. Depending on how the speed is to the towers, you could actually be out in the middle of nowhere and have great internet coverage. Don't expect to watch Netflix on it though. It's mainly for like web pages and stuff like that.
So I have a question on that. So if your internet's out, because I know 70% of the country was covered in snow and ice and stuff, and probably still is. Luckily, we have a kind of a sunny day here. But if you go over to Starbucks and you say, I really have to get some of this work done, and it says connect to the public Wi-Fi, do you connect or
Oh
what?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Just do it. I mean, at this point, you have to. You're going to have to get internet somewhere. Even if you have to go to to a local Hampton Inn, rent one of their conference rooms and pay them a little to share their internet. You've got to have a portable office. You've got to get back up to work as quickly as possible. You can't have your people just sitting at home. And that, by the way, that is an option that I know some businesses do, is they will actually go rent a little conference room at a hotel, have them set up tables for their employees, and they will just run it from there and keep going. Update as necessary. It's the last slide. Play out the scenarios like I just talked about, and I'm giving you a whole bunch of scenarios that can happen. Play them out as it relates to your business and ask, how soon will I be back up? What's going to be the downside? How angry will people be? What are we going to tell people? Document, document, document. If you don't have a disaster recovery plan, make one. And people, listen to me. This is the whole reason you call up your local SBDC, Small Business Development Center, is because they have been trained how to ask the right questions of businesses as it relates to disaster recovery. I'm telling you, it is one of the biggest untapped resources out there because it costs you nothing. You need to get a hold of your SBDC counselor, and they can help you put together the most perfect disaster recovery plan for your business, and you will sleep better. And like I said, cost you nothing. They're the best. Update your key man info. Document what's going to happen if the main guy's gone. What's going to happen if the boss is gone? If she gets hit by a bus, what happens? Make sure someone knows, even if it's just a lawyer or another family member. And always be on the lookout for new threats. You never know where they will be. You never know. I mean, like pandemic, no one thought that would be a threat. No one was making plans based on pandemics. No one was. And so you never know when a new threat might come along. So just start thinking about it, and I mean, heck, at this point, I would even say make a disaster recovery plan in case aliens show up. You just don't know these days, I swear. Well, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
So just raise your hands and I'll unmute your mics. I tell you, I always have a ton of questions every time I'm on a webinar with Eric. Oh, and we have someone raising his hand. All right, Eduardo, you are allowed to talk. You can unmute your mic and ask Eric your question.
And Eduardo, if that isn't working for you, feel free to go ahead and type your question into the Q&A and we can read it and address it there. Not sure what's going on. And Eric, I definitely hope we're not going to get aliens, but you never know.
I swear.
Days. I know. Dare we even say? Dare we even say?
Okay.
Yeah, this is.
Can you hear me now? And yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. So my question is, you mentioned the portable office, right? So whenever we say we can't access our stuff on the cloud, on our phone and stuff, something happens to our office. And in our office, we can run, our malware protection software, VPN. What kind of security can we use for our portable office?
Yeah, I mean, you can do a VPN, virtual private network, for those of you who don't understand that. And it's basically a way of creating a secure connection between you, whether you're at a Starbucks or an airport, and the server you're trying to get to, so that even if someone else intercepted it, it will look like garbage. It's kind of like what's created between you and your bank. So yeah, you can do a VPN. Realize though that a VPN is going to slow your system down because it's an extra layer. Okay. So it will slow your internet down a little bit. But if you are handling highly, highly, highly sensitive information, definitely want to use a VPN. But you've got to find a place with the internet, just raw internet. And like I said, hotels are the best in a pinch, in my opinion. You can do libraries, but you can't talk very loud.
We have someone that has asked if it's okay to ask a question from the last session on Tuesday.
Sure. Why not?
Let's see what the question is. My Biz credit card had several attempts to be hacked at the same time from different countries at the same time, but my bank stopped that. What do I need to consider to avoid that? Oh,
Yeah, if the real question is, how did you find that out? I mean, did you suddenly start seeing transactions that weren't yours, or did you get an email saying it was hacked? So that would be my first question, is how you found out, because sometimes people will try to scare you by telling you you've been hacked and you haven't been hacked. But they say, in order to stop the hacking, click here. In order to verify your credit card, this is Best Buy. In order to verify your credit card, call this number. No. Sometimes it's the biggest spear phishing attack in the world, is pretending there's a disaster when there's not. Because all they really need to do is give you a new card. That's all they need to do. Send a new card. They're not going to try to track who did it. They're not going to try to figure out why. They're just going to send you a new card. So don't fall for this stuff that is actually spear phishing.
So it looks like they were contacted from the bank. That's the answer that just came back on that one.
Okay, if it was a phone call, was it a phone call? Or I'm just saying, be careful. Whenever I get a call like that, and they can be legit, what I will do is I will call them back at the number I know. I will say, thank you, I'm going to call you back. I'm going to call them back, because there's so many ways to fake phone calls now. I mean, heck, I could make my phone caller ID say whatever I want. It could say First National Bank, and I could call you up and say, hey, you've been hacked. Just to verify who you are, what's your password? Oh, by the way, what's your bank account? Oh, can you read me? Can you read me off your debit card? Just verifying.
yeah. So the best thing is, if the bank does contact you, however it is coming from the bank, the best thing is to just get the new credit card. Yep. Okay.
And just tell them, send me a new card. Don't
Okay.
ever tell them your password. Don't ever tell them your card. They have all that. They know that. They didn't lose it. So just say, send me a new card.
Okay.
No.
And I guess the last question is, when are we going to see the Hawaiian shirts again?
I know, right? Well, I mean, I have Hawaiian shirts. I feel like on these with Zoom, I'm in such a small little window. Anyway, I'm also doing these primarily for my besties in the world, my New Mexico SPDC. Okay. And so this is more about them and not about me. So I want to give them their own branding at some point.
Well, I guess
I'll wear one.
Okay, do that. Well, I guess we're wrapped up for today. I really appreciate it, Eric, and
Sure.
we're excited to get into your next webinar. We have some great ones coming up, so we will see you next time. And I think we're coming up on Tuesday next week. So
Be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it.
I never want to miss it. So you guys have a great day, and we will see you next week.